Let's talk about people working from home, shall we? Because according to this study, employees who work from home are less likely to be promoted. This is according to the bosses and their admissions. If you go into the office, you are more likely to get a pay rise. You're more likely to progress through the business. Now, this is a survey done on 251 employers by Reed Group. And essentially, it comes out with that conclusion that if you work in the office, you're going to progress better, you'll get paid more, and your future and your prospects will be brighter. Joining me now is Molly Johnson-Jones, who's CEO and co-founder of Flexa Careers. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Are you surprised by this?
I am actually. I think that stat is really quite shocking.
Is it?
But
Why?
I would actually. It is shocking. I think we need to, first of all, clarify what we really mean by working from home. Because I think there tends to be a conflation of working from home meaning fully remote all of the time. And I think the danger with titles like this of saying people that go into the office are more likely to be promoted is that we suggest that that is in fact people that go into the office every single day. Whereas actually there are tens of thousands of companies out there making hybrid working work as well as remote working work as well.
Yeah, no, I get that. But also we have seen in the civil service that they're all sitting at home doing absolutely diddly squat, being paid money by the state. I want them in the office. I'm paying for them.
Has that really changed from when they're in the office all the time?
Well, that is a moot point. But the fact is, Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think he had a very good point, didn't he? He went round sticking sticky notes on people's desks saying, "Are we going to see you soon?"
Why is that a good point, though? Is that not measuring presenteeism rather than measuring...
Well, in my humble experience, when you work in an office, your productivity is higher because you talk to your colleagues, you have inspirational talks and ideas. I think there is a temptation that work revolves when you're at home. Work revolves around putting the laundry in or feeding the children. I understand it can be productive, but it is also dependent on your own mindset, isn't it? And your own work ethic.
Absolutely. But I'm afraid I think that the people that tend to avoid work when they're working from home are also the people that avoid work in the office. And I'd like to clarify one point there that you said around productivity being higher when people are in the office, because I'm afraid that that's actually just not true. So
who says?
Although this study was done on 251 employers, which is a pretty decent sample size and definitely gives representative results, a study by Nick Bloom, who's a Stanford professor, is it is the largest study, in fact, on the impact of remote work and working from home on productivity. And what his study shows is that actually remote work and working from home are highly complementary. So if we look at hybrid working, for example, which has a definition of anything from a few days a month going into the office versus, up to 3 to 4 days a week in the office. And when he looked at that impact in terms of productivity, it was completely flat. It was identical to people going into the office 5 days a week. But the positive upsides are obviously on ability to attract top talent, diversity, engagement, happiness, loyalty, and retention. So when we say productivity when you are in the office is higher, that's actually totally untrue. It's the same.
So what about team working? Because I have a small business. I've worked in media for a very long time. I work in medical companies and so on. If you're doing Zoom meetings the whole time, the connection is not the same as being there in person.
I totally agree with you, and that's why I think we come back to the point of remote working and in-person working being highly complementary. We need both of them. And in fact, you very rarely see fully remote companies have no in-person time at all. So I think this is when I say about it being a very binary discussion right now, if it's either about going into the office every day or it's about being fully remote. Actually, the majority of companies exist and the majority of individuals' wants and desires exist in that grey area in the middle.
And what do you think is the perfect mix then? If we agree that actually having some time in the office is a good idea and then some remote working so that you have flexibility around childcare or whatever it is, so the house is quiet and you can work late at night and you can concentrate or whatever. What is the ideal split, do you think?
I'm going to give you an answer you probably don't want, which is it really depends on the company. It genuinely does depend on the company. There are some companies where their cultures are much more in person. It might be that there's a lot more learning and an early point in the job. Maybe you're doing graduate schemes. Obviously, learning and by osmosis is much, much harder when you're fully remote. So for those companies, they would need more in-person time. Whereas I run a company that employs dozens of people and we come in together once a month. But that once a month is incredibly important for us to form those social bonds to help people work together. And there are other companies that will do a week-long offsite once a quarter. It is about being open-minded here, about being aware of the fact that this is ultimately the future of work. Like, the work is no longer just going into the office 5 days a week, and it hasn't been for a very long time. We've just been forced into the majority of companies now having to look at this rather than that being a slow progression.
So can I just ask you, why are many companies now reverting and saying to home workers, come back in?
Yeah, it's a really valuable question. And I think we need to look deeper at that. If a company can say, hey, our productivity really has dropped and it's because of working from home, rather than the fact that we are in a macroeconomic downturn, or rather than the fact that perhaps their ways of working aren't adapting with being able to retain top talent and they're losing their top employees. If they can point to, hey, we've really, really suffered and we need to bring people back, fair enough. Companies absolutely have the right to do that. But I think we also need to be aware that there are other reasons for companies doing this. That could be a loyalty test, for example, like Elon Musk at X.
Yes.
It could be, as we've seen with a lot of companies, a masked redundancy drive where they want people to leave. And it's cheaper just to demand people back into the office to get rid of a large number of people. And we also need to look at ulterior motives. Like, there are many CEOs who have made their careers in person, and they believe that that is how it should be done. And it is their own belief that that is better. And I think what we need to stop doing is saying, hey, productivity is lower. People are going to stop getting...
But if it's a private company and the boss thinks they want their staff in the office, then surely the staff need to be in the office.
And it's totally their right to do that, but they need to be aware of the consequences. And I think there's a lot of...
What consequences?
Of people leaving. Their best people will leave.
But then there'll be other people.
Yes, but the best people will demand flexibility.
I'm not sure that's true, to be honest. I think that isn't it very difficult to evaluate performance at home if you're sitting there in your underwear doing a Zoom call?
But I think that's a very specific view of how people work from home. The majority of people don't do that. It's impossible to evaluate performance if people are working from home if your performance measurement is based on presenteeism and sitting in an office and tapping your swipe card in. If you're focusing on proper performance metrics, hitting KPIs, hitting targets, it is exactly the same. And if anything, I would say that we are forcing companies by the future of work evolving to actually measure performance in a reliable and measurable way, rather than just doing the old school relationship building. Hey, I saw that person, that means they're working.
What happens to teamwork? Because in the companies I've worked in, working closely with them, you socialise with them, you go to the pub with them, you have better interpersonal relationships, you understand each other. And also, I go back to the creative side of this, you tend to bounce ideas off each other far more when you're together.
Yeah, I totally agree, which is why that balance is needed. But I think also companies, when they are intentional about how they run the companies, about how they bring people together, can foster brilliant collaboration, brainstorming, innovation online. We have so many tools in front of us that the type of invention that is happening in this space is happening at such a fast rate because there's so much demand for it. We've got companies distributed all over the world. They will drive that change. So it's embracing the fact that you will get more out of people if we balance remote and in person together and focus on the grey area rather than having big arguments about whether you're fully remote team or in-office team.
And just finally, if I may, Labour is very keen to push ahead with a 4-day week. Would you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a very interesting test to do, and I think it is very much worth trialling because a lot of the other companies that have done it have seen really, really interesting results. And I think the only way to disprove people's opinions on these kind of things is to do proper, measurable, reliable studies.
Molly, really good to talk to you. Thanks for your time. Molly JohnsonJones, their CEO and co-founder of Flexa Careers.